All right, everybody, we are back this week for UFC Seattle. Cejudo versus Song, or Cejudo versus Song Yadong. Preview, predictions, and breakdown. The fights take place this upcoming Saturday from Seattle, Washington, and we have a banger of a main event in the bantamweight division with the return of Triple C. Henry Cejudo coming back after that decision defeat to the current champion in Merab, the Machine Fili, taking on knockout artist, standout boxer, and a pretty well-rounded MMA fighter all together, I guess you could say, in Team Alpha Male's Song Yadong, the Kung Fu Kid. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. All right, guys, we are back for this week's UFC preview, predictions, and breakdown. I had custom graphics last week, and I think they look pretty good. This week, we're just going back to the original format. I'm going to try to make this podcast to under an hour. Like, my goal is to make this under an hour. If it's a lot less than an hour, then maybe I'll, talk a little bit more than I normally do. But I don't think there has to be a ton of explanation on some of these fights, so we'll probably get through them pretty quick. Last week, I believe we went 7-5. Picked Walter Walker by submission. That was a pretty solid pick. I would say. Didn't bet the Walter Walker by heel hook, which I probably should have because it was 50-1 on BetMGM, but that's besides the point. Didn't do it. Edmund Shabazian KO, I think that was a gimme. I did play the Budka KO 2-3, but I mean, that was just a sprinkle just in case he got out of that first round. But I mean, that right hand right over the lead shoulder, boom, dropped him, put him down. Nazim Sadykhov, I wasn't the only guy who picked him this week. I think he did get a lot of love, but a lot of people were right in that double Bonfim Bros parlay for this week. I ended up with a parlay that was Nazim Sadykhov moneyline and Jose Delgado moneyline. I had another one that was Delgado KO, Shabazian, and Budka doesn't go the distance, and two other legs, but it was a cash out of like 118 going into the main event, and all I needed was Gregory Rodriguez inside the distance. But that was my fault. You know what? I'm going to take responsibility for that pick, because even on the podcast, you go back and you listen to it, I said, don't pick a side, just bet fight ends by KO. I think it started out minus 180. It jumped all the way up to like minus 230. Even at a minus 230, I wasn't getting that much different of a line movement by picking a side in Rodriguez. And yeah, it looked good early, but Rodriguez gassed out, and then Cannonier just used that veteran experience and the veteran savvy and just kind of beat the shit out of him. Now, looking at this card, this is a very solid card. I think some people might look at this card and think, oh, there's a lot of Contender Series guys on here, and, mix up some words and say that this card isn't that good. Honestly, I think this is a good card. I think this has a lot of good matchups. I think the main event between Cejudo and Song Yadong is a very good fight. I think the co-main event is also very good between Anthony Hernandez and Brendan Allen, which is a rematch back from, I believe, LFA, where Hernandez won that fight via decision. Can't wait to get into that fight and break it down. It is a co-main event, but it is not a 5-round co-main event. It is a 3-rounder. But yeah, let's get into this week's predictions. I think we were 7-5 last week. Not the best, but I can do better this week, and that's what we're going to try to do. So let's get into it with UFC Seattle. All right, first fight up is in the light heavyweight division. You have a battle between the man coming off of his first submission victory, I believe, of his career. I know for sure it's his first submission in the UFC. In Modestas Bukauskas, taking on a fighter from the Contender Series in Rafael Cerqueira. I honestly don't think Cerqueira is UFC level. I never really did. I don't think the fighter he fought in his last fight, who's also on this card, in Ibo Aslan, is technically UFC level either. But I figured Aslan was just going to get into the pocket, crash the pocket, and throw down, and that's exactly what he did, and he finished him early. In this fight, the UFC veteran experience obviously goes to Bukauskas, but Bukauskas also gets hit so many times. I mean, if you're going life and death with a fighter like Marcin Prachnio, yes, it's a UFC level competitor, but I don't rate Prachnio very high level either. And he almost knocked you out with that crazy little question mark kick from inside the pocket. We don't really see fighters throw kicks from that close of range because they don't have the dexterity in their hips to really turn it over the right way. But yeah, I mean, he got hit with that and then eventually landed some big shots on the feet, was kind of dominating the fight until he got rocked, and then got the takedown, got on top, and got that arm triangle choke submission from half guard. Yeah, in this one, I think Cerqueira can obviously knock out Bukauskas. I think Bukauskas is there to be hit. I think that if they get into exchanges, you're giving Cerqueira an opportunity to knock you out. I do not agree with the odds. I mean, the odds on Bukauskas are like minus 350, minus 400. There's nobody that Bukauskas should fight that should make him that high of a favorite. If you're looking at it from a betting perspective, it's a dog or pass situation because Bukauskas does have that button where you can hit him on the chin and put him down and knock him out. But if you're looking at it from a breakdown perspective, which is what this podcast is about, taking the bets aside, I think based on the UFC level experience, based on the overall game, I think Bukauskas can use his grappling. I think he can use his jab. I think he can get some takedowns. And I think he probably finishes Cerqueira with some ground and pound. But like I said, I mean, if you're looking at a betting perspective, I think the only bet is Cerqueira money line or Cerqueira by knockout, because I think it's definitely live here for him to knock out a guy like Bukauskas, who hasn't been finished, a ton of times, but he has been knocked out his fair share of times and can get clipped on that chin. So I'm going to pick Bukauskas to win via a second round ground and pound TKO. Could be a submission. He could ground him and grab a choke and submit him again. But I think he ground and pounds him and finishes him late. I think he has to survive a questionable first round, avoid getting clipped, which is kind of a big ask, if you're talking about Modestas Bukauskas, because he is, like I said, fragile in the chin region. But I'm going to take Bukauskas to weather that early storm, use his veteran experience in the UFC, get a takedown, get on top, and ground and pound his way to a TKO. Give me Modestas Bukauskas via second round ground and pound finish in this fight. Up next, you have a battle in the middleweight division between two Contender Series alums. You have the UFC's marketing machine in Abdul Malik taking on Nick Klein. Now, Klein beat his opponent on the Contender Series with a quick takedown to a scramble to a rear naked choke with no hooks in. And I actually thought, based on tape, you couldn't really find a lot of tape on Klein or his opponent. And that was kind of an issue with some guys on the Contender Series last year, even though we ended at, I think, like a 73%, 74% accuracy, somewhere around there. We had a couple bad last weeks that dropped it. Maybe it was like a 70, 71. I can't remember off the top of my head. But, I thought, since you couldn't really find too much, I sided with the favorite to get a finish. I thought he looked better on tape. But that didn't matter. They got into a takedown, or I think Klein got a takedown. They got into a scramble. Klein locked up the rear naked choke with no hooks in and got a submission in the first round. Ran over to the cage and said, "John Jones is the greatest fucking fighter in the history of the UFC." And Dana White gave him the UFC contract. And now they're feeding him to Abdul Malik. Now, Malik came off the Contender Series. That was a fight where I believe I picked him to win in the first 2 rounds. He got it done, but it looked like he was going to gas out in that one, and there was just some scrambles in there. And then he comes into the UFC, beats Dusko Todorovic, but is just winging punches from heaven. He's winging punches from heaven above and hell below. Big hooks, big uppercuts, big overhands, kind of flailing all over the place. And yeah, he's got a lot of power, and he showcased it against Dusko Todorovic, who has competed in the UFC a bunch of times, but he's basically, the person who the UFC feeds to the guys that they're trying to push. Punahele Soriano, Mansour Abdul Malik is another example of that. I think the UFC is very high on this kid. He comes out of Extreme Couture, fighting under coach Eric Nixick, and, Nixick is a great coach. I've interviewed him on this podcast multiple times before. He's one of the coaches I can actually reach out to with a message, and he will get back to you and even can have a conversation here and there when he's not super busy training the highest level of competitors in the UFC and other organizations as well. But back to the breakdown at hand. I think Malik should win this fight. I think Klein is probably the better technical striker. I think he might be the better grappler in terms of jiu-jitsu. I think Malik has the powerful and more explosive wrestling. And I think it really just comes down to Mansoor Abdul Malik is a athletic mixed martial artist. He's not so good technically. He doesn't have the best game, but he's an athlete. And he throws with heavy power. And he knows how to win. I do not think Mansoor Abdul Malik or Mansoor Abdul Malik is going to be that successful in the UFC. I'll tell you right now, I do not think this guy is going to be as good as some people are kind of touting him out to be. And, you know, you look at the Contender Series guys, a lot of these guys, they come in off the Contender. Some of them have good performances, some of them don't. You know, it tends to be more on the they don't have a good performance than they do at this point in the UFC. Or at this point in the UFC's history of the Contender Series. They come in and they lose. Now, in 2025, I think something like 9 or 10 fighters, maybe more, have already lost their undefeated records. And in this one, I could easily see Nick Klein getting beat up, getting tagged, but then Malik shoots a bad takedown, Klein wins a scramble, and Klein winds up on his back and gets a submission. Now, that's also kind of cheap of me to say, but I did go back and watch some regional footage of him, and he has decent wrestling. He has decent trips, inside and outside trips inside the clinch. He knows when to get those takedowns. He knows when to wind up on top, and he knows when to go for submissions. I mean, this guy is a good grappler. I would venture to say I think he is a better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist and grappler than Mansoor Abdul Malik, but I think Malik is the better wrestler, and wrestling can usually nullify the jiu-jitsu by winning position over the submission. And in this fight, I do think that Klein is more technical on the feet. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you just because I see a huge price tag on Mansoor Abdul Malik. I think that MAM is a powerful, explosive athlete. He's got good wrestling. You know, he pushes for a finish. But even on the Contender Series, that wasn't the most impressive performance. He weathered the storm. He found a way to win. He didn't get the guy out of there in the first round. He stayed calm, got on top, and beat him up. Now, in this fight, I think Mansoor Abdul Malik should win. I think he probably gets a knockout in this fight over a submission. So the pick for me is going to be Mansoor Abdul Malik by knockout. I think he will clip the chin of Nick Klein. But I'm going to tell you this right now. If I'm betting on this fight, and this kind of goes against my logic of who I just picked, I would take a stab at Nick Klein by submission. I think he is much better in the jiu-jitsu than Malik. And I think if he wins, it is some sort of a choke where he wins a scramble, gets Malik tired. And like I said, he is, you know, the more powerful, not more powerful, but I think he's more technical on the feet too. So he might even catch Malik coming in with one of those wide looping shots as he crashes in, drop him, and grab a choke of his own. Or even drop him and maybe get a TKO, but I think it would be more of a drop and then jumping to a grappling an advantageous position on the ground and getting a sub. So the pick is going to be Mansoor Abdul Malik, second round knockout. But if I bet on it, I'm going to take a stab at Nick Klein by submission. I think that there is a case where Malik gets beat here. And a lot of these undefeated guys, like I said, they are losing their records. And Klein, you know, had kind of a pretty big upset on the Contender Series. And I could see him pulling off another upset here against Malik because of how raw his overall MMA game is. Like, I just see so many holes on the feet, so many opportunities for him to get countered, so many opportunities for him to not have the success he's used to in the beginning of a fight. And yeah, I think he can still come through it, but I think there could be a possibility where Klein, you know, weathers a storm and then gets a submission in the later rounds. So I'm going to pick Mansoor Abdul Malik, second round knockout over Nick Klein. But like I said, if I'm betting on it, the bet would be Nick Klein by submission, because I think there's a shot at that for sure. All right, next up is a fight in the bantamweight division between UFC and bantamweight veteran Ricky Simón taking on one half of the Basharat brothers in Javid Basharat. 14-1 on the side of Javid, 20-6 on the side of Ricky Simón. The last time we saw Simón inside the octagon, he ended up losing to Vinicius Oliveira. Prior to that, he lost to Mario Bautista. That was two different fights where we picked against Ricky Simón. We picked Ricky Simón to get the job done via submission over Jack Shore as a pretty sizable underdog in that one as well. I feel like we have a pretty good read on Ricky Simón, and I think he's going to get outpointed against Javid Basharat. I think he's going to get outpointed. I think there's going to be a lot of poking and prodding, using the jab, switching stances, front kicks up the middle to the body of Ricky Simón. I think Simón will get some takedowns. I'm not going to lie to you. I think he will use his wrestling, crash the pocket, get some takedowns, but I think eventually Javid will just work his way back up to the feet. I think there's going to be, like I said, a lot of stance changes, a lot of orthodox to southpaw, southpaw to orthodox, using the jabs and the 1-2s to disguise the stance changes, throwing some knees up the middle, but trying not to really overcommit on those knees so he doesn't get caught with a level change and taken down. I think it's going to be a point fighting match. I think Simon's going to land some big shots at a certain point. He might hit Basharat with a big right hand and hurt him, big overhand right, and hurt him at a certain point. But I think Basharat's just going to kind of poke and prod and use his overall striking, the jabs, the feints, the front kicks to the body, knees on the level changes, sprawling out, low kicks, changing stance, bop, move, 1-2, bop, bop, move, jab, hook, right hand, jab, front kick to the body, knees, circle off, jab, jab. And I think it's going to be a pretty boring fight, but I think Javid Basharat is going to win this fight by decision. I think that eventually we will see this guy get a finish. I think he might have one submission in the UFC, but mainly the Basharat brothers are winning fights by decision. He did lose. Well, he had that no contest against Victor Henry, and then he did end up losing to Ayman Zahabi, where, again, Zahabi was just outlanding him. He was outlanding him, picking him apart, landing the bigger shots, and, winning a point fighting match, which is what you're going to get against the Basharat brother. They're smart, they're technical, they're clean strikers, but at the same time, I think Javid is a younger in terms of his UFC career. I think Ricky Simón might be able to get the job done here. I don't think Javid is going to be a high-level bantamweight, but I do think he will win this fight. Do I think he finishes Ricky Simón? No, I don't. I don't think he finishes him, but I think he kind of just dances around, moves laterally, switches his stances, pumps out the jab, throws some 1-2s, good inside and outside low kicks, front kicks to the body, stuffs a lot of the takedowns, maybe gets a takedown of his own, and wins a competitive but clear 29-28 unanimous decision. So the pick is going to be Javid Basharat. 29-28 unanimous decision. I think he wins the fight on the judges' scorecards. I understand people taking a shot at Ricky Simón as an underdog because of his power, because of his wrestling, because of the fact that he has beat prospects before, but I just don't think Ricky Simón is a smart play in this matchup, because even if he can have big moments in Basharat, I think he can just outpoint him and win on the scorecards. Kind of like a Yusuf Zalal against Kelvin Kattar type of thing that we saw this last weekend, which, don't get me started on that. I had Kattar by decision, comes alive in the third round and starts piecing him up, but didn't do enough for the first two. But for this fight, the pick is Basharat, 29-28, unanimous decision. I just don't think Ricky's going to be able to do enough to get the job done here. All right, next fight up is in the featherweight division. You have a battle between Andre Touchy Fili taking on Melquizael Costa. This is an interesting fight. One of my more interesting fights on the card, and I do believe that the fighter who's faster, more technical, cleaner, and more dangerous on the feet is Andre Touchy Fili. I also think that Melquizael Costa is the better grappler, the better wrestler, has better top control, and has better ability to look for those submissions. We know that he's going to have the better jiu-jitsu in this fight. It's not rocket science, but Andre Fili also has a 70% takedown defense rate. And in this fight, I think there's a possibility of those front kicks and teeps to the body of Mel Costa to start slowing down Andre Fili. I think he will start to attack the body. I think we will see a lot of clinching from Costa, but I think Andre Fili's cage wrestling is very good. It's very underrated. He has good takedown defense, good ability to get off the cage, good ability to circle off the cage, pummel, double under, over-unders, and work his way back to the center. And I think Andre Fili is going to absolutely beat the brakes off of Costa on the feet. I don't really think this fight's going to be competitive on the feet, and I don't see Costa really getting prolonged success in terms of the wrestling, in terms of the top control, in terms of the jiu-jitsu. I mean, Fili has a 70% takedown defense right now. Costa doesn't shoot traditional takedowns. It's inside and outside trips in the clinch, direct one way, bring him back the other way. And I think he might get 1 or 2 takedowns, but I think it's going to be very hard for Costa to get those takedowns. And even when he does, I think we will see Fili working his way back up to the feet. And I think Fili's faster, cleaner, those stance switches, the 1-2 head kick, switch stance. I think we're going to see a very similar performance from Andre Fili in this fight that we saw against a man by the name of Daniel the Pit Pineda. I think we're going to see kind of an all-time performance from Andre Fili here. I think he's much better on the feet, and he's not easy to take down. And I think the only way that Costa really has a lot of success in this fight is by getting takedowns, holding down Fili, and looking for a sub or landing a lot of ground and pound. Like, I think Fili can be hurt. I mean, we saw Dan Ige hit him with that right hand early, knock him out. But I don't think we have to really worry about a knockout from Costa unless it's like a knee in the clinch or an elbow off the break that drops Fili and hurts him. We do have to worry a little bit about the durability of Fili, but if he can last on the feet against Cub Swanson, I don't really see a knockout threat coming from Costa aside from, like I said, a knee up the middle or an elbow over the top. In this one, I got to go with Fili, man. I think Fili is the clear side here. I think he has good enough takedown defense to keep the fight on the feet. I think he uses good footwork, good lateral movement, good stance changes. He stance changes in the midst of combinations. He knows how to use his length and his reach. He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage in this one, a 1-inch height advantage, but he's going to use that reach and length a lot better than a guy like Costa, and I think he's just going to start to piece him up. I think we're going to see Costa crash the pocket, look for some takedowns. Maybe he gets 1 in the first round, but aside from that, Fili's, defending the takedowns, working to pummel, double unders, over unders, or look for the double unders, push back to the center of the cage, start working his jab, start working the 1-2. And I think we're going to get a second round TKO here from Andre Touchy Fili. Would not surprise me if the fight went to a decision, but I think in this fight, the speed, the power, the technique, the footwork, the movement, it's all on the side of Fili, and I don't see prolonged takedown and jiu-jitsu grappling success from Costa, so I think he's going to have a decent first round but still get beat up, and I think in the second round, Fili's going to step on the gas, put some combinations together, put a combination together that rocks Costa, drops him, and he jumps on him and gets a TKO. Give me Andre Touchy Fili to go back-to-back in the win column with a second round TKO victory over Melquizael Costa. I like Fili here, and I like him for the KO. All right, up next, we've got a battle in the light heavyweight division between Atomic Alonzo Menifield taking on Julius Walker. I believe his nickname is the Juice Box. I'm going to be real with you guys. I did see some tape on Walker. He's decent on the feet. He moves around pretty well, but he's easy to take down. He gets back up to his feet. He can pummel. He can turn you back against the cage. He can go for takedowns as well. But honestly, I don't really see this guy as being UFC level. And I think Alonzo Menifield is UFC level. And I think that's what it comes down to. I think Menifield is faster. I think he hits harder. I think he has better takedown defense. I think he even has better clinch control. I kind of see it as he's better everywhere than Julius Walker, in my opinion. I think he's got more technical striking. I think he has better range management. Well, not range management. I would say that Walker manages the range and distance and uses long strikes a little bit better. But I think he has better offensive wrestling, better defensive wrestling. I think he hits harder than Julius Walker. I think he's a cleaner striker than Julius Walker. And, Walker's also coming in on short notice. Now, we saw Carlos Ulberg knock Alonzo Menifield out in the first round. Early KO, finished him off. We saw, Azamat Mirzakhanov also knock out Alonzo Menifield. Those are 2 brutal KOs that he's coming back from. So we don't know the status of the chin of Atomic Alonzo. We really don't. So the only thing that would worry me is, what is his chin like? And can Walker find a shot that puts down Alonzo Menifield? I think he can, but I also think this is a fight to get Alonzo Menifield back on track. This is a fight that I think pushes him back in the right direction because, Alonzo Menifield has that win over Dustin Jacoby. I think he's a really solid light heavyweight. Sometimes he lacks volume, but I think he's a good striker. I think he's got good wrestling, good defensive wrestling, and I think he can win this fight pretty much anywhere. And I think the UFC are doing this to kind of a little bit of a favor to Menifield after fighting all the killers that he's fought recently. And I think Menifield's going to get a knockout here. But I am worried because, like I said, coming off those KO losses, it is a little bit worrisome that he could get knocked out again. I mean, the knockout against Carlos Solberg was vicious. It was early. It was quick. So he didn't take prolonged damage, but it was a quick KO. And then the knockout against Mirzakhanov again, a pretty quick KO. I thought he came back a little bit too soon going into that Mirzakhanov fight. He's taken a little bit more time off here, but I still worry, coming off back-to-back KOs, does he just not have the ability to take a punch anymore? If I'm going to play Julius Walker, I would take Walker by knockout. I think that that's probably how he wins, just based off the durability concerns at this point for Menifield. But I also see Menifield as being better everywhere. And even though he's coming off back-to-back losses, I think he's a better fighter, a better mixed martial artist, a better striker, a better grappler than Julius Walker. And I think he wins this fight, man. I'm going to go with the favorite. I'm going to go with Alonzo Menifield to win this fight by knockout. I'm going to go with a first-round knockout for Alonzo Menifield. Wouldn't surprise me if Walker sprung the upset just based on the durability concerns I talked about, but overall, I'm going to go with Menifield. I think this is a fight to get him back on track, and I think he's a really solid MMA fighter. I really do. I've been on that guy's... I've been on the Menifield train for a while, and I even picked him against Jacoby, and I think he can get the job done here. So give me Menifield, first round knockout over Julius Walker. All right, up next we've got a battle in the light heavyweight division between Iwan the Hulk Cutelaba taking on Ibo Aslan. Ibo versus Iwan. That's what I like to call this fight. I think the more technical fighter is Cutelaba. I think that we've seen him kind of come into his own a little bit, and I think that he manages his energy better. He uses his wrestling more than he used to prior. He can mix up his combinations, punctuate his combinations with kicks, and I think Cutelaba has become the more... a smarter version of himself. This might be the most dialed-in version of an Iwan Cutelaba that we've seen before. Now, people are going to look at the fights that he lost. He lost a decision to Felipe Lins. I picked Lins there as an underdog. He lost via, a controversial stoppage in the first fight to Magomed Ankalaev, and then in the second fight, he got knocked out clean in the first round, kind of showing that first fight was going to go that way, even if there wasn't that little rope-a-dope stunt that took place the first time. I think Cutelaba has better wrestling than Ibo Aslan. I think the smart thing for Cutelaba to do would be using the jab, throwing some low kicks, change levels, get him down to the ground. Cutelaba is going to want to use his grappling, use his wrestling, get on top of Ibo Aslan and hold him there, beat him up with ground and pound, who, Cutelaba does have some vicious ground and pound, and he also has good submissions, and I think that's what he's going to want to do here. You don't want to stay on the feet and strike for too long with a guy like Ibo Aslan, because even though I don't think he's good technically, I don't think he has a lot of technical skill. Kind of compare him a little bit to Mansour Abdul Malik, but I think Malik's more technical than Ibo Aslan. But Ibo Aslan just has knockout power. He comes forward and he looks to knock your head into the stratosphere. Now, I will say, the Rafael Cerqueira fight, where he had the UFC debut, the round one knockout, that crazy finish, he did work the body in between those headshots. So it was like rip, 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 rip to the body, come back up top. So that does show that he has a little bit of a technical understanding. By going up top to the head, ripping back to the body, coming back up top, we know that he has a little bit of a technical understanding of the game, and that he isn't just a meathead throwing big bombs. Even though that's how he fights, he did get a late TKO over Anton Turkalj, but Turkalj was kind of piecing him up a little bit in that fight. He ended that fight with a swollen eye, a little beat up, and, that's not what people were expecting. I think people were expecting Aslan to just come in, clean house, and beat him up, knock him out early, and go home. I know a lot of people who probably bet the round 2 KO for Ibo Aslan and went home really sad when he ended up getting that finish in the third round. He always says, I come here to knock people out. Now, looking at the fight with Cutelaba is more technical. Cutelaba has better grappling. Cutelaba has, I would say, better wrestling as well. I think he's a more well-rounded fighter than Ibo Aslan, but I think eventually Aslan's going to knock out Cutelaba. I do. I think Aslan is going to rip a big shot, land a big hook on the chin of Cutelaba in an exchange, put him down, and finish him. You know, even against Ivan Arslan, I bet Arslan, I think, in the third round at like plus 1,000. I put $10 on him, and it went to a split decision. Ivan Arslan's pretty solid fighter, but hadn't had any experience in the UFC. And he survived a, ass whooping in the first round and then came back to do some damage of his own, but ultimately just get out-wrestled and outstruck and just beat to the punch. But it was a split decision. So I don't consider that a bad bet for me, getting plus 900, plus 1,000 in the third round of a fight that Arslan won the third round. Now we've got Ion versus Ibo. You have Aslan versus Arslan. There's a little bit of a contingency plan there, a little bit of too much similarity in some aspects of the game. But in this one, I do think that Ibo's going to find the chin of Cutelaba. I think he will just crack that chin of Iwan Cutelaba and knock him out. I'm going to go with a first-round knockout for Ibo Aslan. I just worry. I think Cutelaba's the better fighter. I just don't think he's durable enough to take the punches of Aslan, and I think that's what it comes down to. He could land a counter. He should wrestle. He should look for grappling. He should look for ground and pound, look for a sub. But I think eventually he's just going to crack the chin of Cutelaba, and Cutelaba could be running away with it, could be easily winning this fight, and then just gets clipped and gets put down. That's the type of fighter that Ibo Aslan is. He comes to knock people out. I think he does it here. Give me Ibo Aslan to defeat Iwan Cutelaba. Give me a second-round knockout for Ibo Aslan. I think he finds the chin, and I think he knocks him out. Not one I would be rushing to bet on, because I think Cutelaba could win this fight, and I don't think Aslan is that good, but he just has that power, that equalizer, and I think that equalizer finds the chin of Cutelaba and it smashes the Hulk here. I think the Hulk gets Hulk smashed. So give me Ibo Aslan, second round knockout over Iwan Cutelaba. All right, now probably my favorite fight on the card it says it's a catchweight bout, so I'm guessing it's going to be at 140, but it should be in the 135-pound division. You have a battle between Rob Font fighting out of the New England Cartel, taking on a fighter who's came off the Contender Series but has 2 wins in the UFC, undefeated mixed martial artist, 16-0 in Gene Matsumoto. I'm not going to lie to you guys, I'm a big fan of Rob Font. You already know that if you've watched this podcast before. And I'm also a big fan of Gene Matsumoto. I think even though this fight's on short notice, I would have rather see Dominic Cruz and Rob Font. I think this is a suitable replacement, to say the least. Gene Matsumoto is a solid mixed martial artist. He has very powerful leg kicks, very good kicks to the body, and very solid pocket boxing, man. He's a guy who sits on his punches and trades in the pocket and can come back with a right hand, a left hook, good uppercuts, 1-2, left hook, cross hook. And he really just sits there and sits down on his punches. That's something that we don't see a ton in mixed martial arts, at least to a high success rate, is people who really just sit down on their punches. Another example of it, even though it's nowhere near the power of this specific individual, would be Alex Pereira, throwing his shots, leg kicks, and then just boom, turning that left hook over. Boom, turning that right hand over, really sitting down on his punches and exchanging. Gene Matsumoto loves to get into exchanges. He likes to get into fights where you're fighting in that proverbial phone booth, and he'll sit down and he'll throw that right hand. He'll sit down, he'll throw that left hook. He's got good uppercuts, very solid low kicks, punctuates his combinations with low kicks. He's a very good mixed martial artist. He can wrestle, and I would say if you're going against a guy in Rob Font who's had issues with takedown defense and wrestling before, you probably want to throw your punches, exchange, rock him or hurt him in an exchange, and then look for your takedowns and win on control time. Kind of do what Kyler Phillips did in the first round of their fight. Then he gassed out, worked his way back up to the feet in the second round, and he started piecing him up. You can't really win a boxing match against a guy like Rob Font. If you have awkward techniques, like a Cheeto Vera with that side kick or the front kick to the chin, you can hurt him, you can rock him. Jose Aldo was able to hurt Rob Font with some big punches and sit down on his shots, but I don't think Matsumoto is near the level of a Jose Aldo in terms of his boxing ability, in terms of anything really, and I don't really think you have to sit here and think about that. I think this is a fight where we could easily see another vet lesson like we've seen so many times. So many fighters with their O, they lose their O, especially in 2025. I saw Matsumoto, yes, he won the fight against Brad Katona. Katona's a veteran, but it was kind of back and forth. It was a little bit too close for my liking, even though I do think it was unanimous. I think Katona did lose 2 out of those 3 rounds. I don't see Matsumoto rocking Font and catching him in that patented guillotine choke and submitting him. I don't think he's going to knock out Rob Font, and I think for the most part, the striking exchanges on the feet are going to be primarily taking place in boxing range. I think the inside and outside low kicks are going to be a weapon for Matsumoto, but I think that jab, the 1-2, the 3-2, the 1-3-2 of Rob Font, the 1-3 long rear uppercut, those are all going to be weapons that we see Font use, especially against a fighter in Matsumoto who loves to use that high guard. He high guards, kind of like Rob Font, but he'll sit and exchange in the pocket, and he'll sit down on his shots. Rob Font would be, well-versed to use his jab in this fight. Use long punches, use that long uppercut, use that jab, use that 1-2, and don't sit in those, close ranges where he can come over with a big overhand right, where he can sneak up the middle with a big uppercut. We've seen Font get rocked so many times. We've never seen him get finished in the UFC by knockout. We've seen him get submitted. I don't think Matsumoto submits him unless it's him rocking him with a big shot and then jumping on that guillotine. I think that is a possibility. But I'm going to go with the underdog here. I'm going to go with Rob Font. I think he's around plus 180, plus 190 as an underdog. And I think in what's primarily going to be a boxing match on the feet in MMA, I think Rob Font is one of the best boxers in the UFC. And I think he's going to use that length, use that reach, and just kind of poke and pick apart Matsumoto. I wouldn't be surprised if Font got a knockout in this fight. I'm going to tell you that right now. I would not be surprised if Matsumoto got too comfortable in the exchanges and got hit with a big bomb, just like an Adrian Yanez, and got knocked out. Now, I think Matsumoto's a better fighter than an Adrian Yanez. I think he has more power than a guy like Yanez. I think he sits down on his punches more, which makes those pocket boxing exchanges a little bit more worrisome for a guy like Font. But I think if he can't really get into those boxing exchanges in the pocket, he's just going to use that jab, and he's going to use that 1-2, and he's going to move around. And I don't think Matsumoto hurts him or rocks him. Would I be surprised if Matsumoto won this fight? He dropped Rob Font a couple times and won a decision? No, because like I said, this guy does get into those pocket boxing exchanges, those close range exchanges, and he just throws big overhand, big left hook, big uppercut, and they are technical punches. It's not like he's a brawler. He'll throw a straight right, a left hook, a rear uppercut, an overhand right, and he has a lot of power on those. But I don't think this is a fight that Matsumoto's going to win over 15 minutes. And I think if there is a finish, I think it probably comes from the hands and the boxing, the overall cleaner boxer in Rob Font here. I'm going to take Font to win by decision. Give me the underdog, Rob Font, 29-28 unanimous decision. I think he just kind of out-jabs, out-pops Matsumoto on the feet, out-strikes him, lands in between his shots, sticks at the range he wants to stay at, and kind of has Matsumoto trying to chase him and sit down on big shots in the pocket. But I think Font's going to use that jab, use those front kicks to the body, and just move around and kind of outbox, give him a vet lesson for Gene Matsumoto. So give me Rob Font, 29-28 unanimous decision. I could even see a late knockout, but I'm going to go with the decision here for Font. I think he wins, and I think he looks good doing it. I think he goes 2-0 in his last 2 fights, goes on a little win streak, and then he probably gets a really, really tough matchup. And even if Matsumoto loses this fight, I don't think it does a lot to halt his career. I think we'll see Matsumoto in the top of the division at a certain point. I just think Rob Font is too much too soon for Matsumoto, especially on short notice. So Rob Font, 29-28 unanimous decision. Like I said, I could see a late KO, but I'm going to go with the scorecard win for the New England Cartel's Rob Font over Gene Matsumoto. All right, next up we have a battle in the featherweight division between Gene Silva taking on Melsik Baghdasaryan. This is another good fight. I think a lot of people are going to come in here and immediately write off Baghdasaryan. And there's some ways which I see that being the correct way to analyze this fight. I think if Gene Silva looks to grapple, he would have a lot of success here, but we know that he's not really going to look to grapple. Maybe he'll throw in a ninja choke if Baghdasaryan shoots a bad takedown, but for the most part, this guy's going to come out. He's going to kind of take the first round to read the opponent, start to throw some good counters, coming in as a southpaw, and start to bang those shots, right? Or I'm sorry, coming in orthodox against a southpaw in Baghdasaryan. He's going to be coming in looking to bang that straight left hand, right hook. The check hook from Gene Silva is very solid. He used it a lot in his fight against Drew Dober, and it worked very well. That little check step-off hook is good. The straight down the middle, good front kicks to the body. He knows what he's doing, and he knows how to pick his shots. And I feel like even if Baghdasaryan does grapple, I think maybe he gets Silva down one time and then he gets back up to his feet. And we've seen Baghdasaryan have issues with getting taken down, getting controlled, getting out-wrestled, and even getting submitted by the likes of Josh Cutelaba in a fight that he was pretty much dominating on the feet, and then he ended up losing a scramble and getting choked. Sneaky play for this fight would be Gene Silva by submission, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be a close first round. I think those body kicks of Baghdasaryan are going to work pretty good. I honestly think the way you beat a guy like Gene Silva is to start low, work the legs, work the body, and then start to break him to the head. I think you can rip this guy to the body because of that traditional high guard, and I think if anybody can do it, it probably is a guy with the kickboxing, the in-and-out movement, and the explosiveness, especially in his kicking game, of Melsik Baghdasaryan. I think those rear kicks to the body would be a big weapon against a guy like Gene Silva. Now, when it comes to who I'm going to pick, I'm going to take Gene Silva. I'm not going to sit here and break this down. I think it's a close competitive first round. I think towards the end of the first round, that's when Silva starts to land his shots, starts to outwork him, starts to outpace him, and I think Gene Silva starts to break him to the body, starts throwing uppercuts. Those elbows off the break, I think, are going to be a good weapon, but it's going to be hard to land elbows on Baghdasaryan until later on in the fight, because Baghdasaryan doesn't want to crash the pocket. He'll probably be staying out at range, using the lateral movement, using the angle steps, and circling, trying to get that outside foot position. But I think those elbows eventually will start to work when Baghdasaryan gets tired from being on that back foot and gets pushed back. I'm going to go with a late second round TKO for Gene Silva here. I think Lord Silva gets another impressive win here. I don't really understand the matchmaking considering he beat Drew Dober. Now you're fighting Baghdasaryan. I know that was at lightweight, this is at featherweight, but I think he should get a higher ranked opponent. I'm guessing maybe they asked a few people and a lot of people declined the matchup. I think that's the only way that this fight makes sense. It's a good fight. Baghdasaryan's not a pushover. Baghdasaryan is a good striker. Like I said, those body kicks could be a problem for Gene Silva, but I eventually just expect him to kind of walk through the fire, get Baghdasaryan on the back foot, or get Baghdasaryan on the back foot, start to close the distance, land those elbows, those up elbows, elbows off the break, throwing front kicks and snap kicks to the body, and I think he breaks him down and finishes him up against the cage. So give me a late second round TKO for Gene Silva, Lord Gene Silva, against Melsik Baghdasaryan in this fight. I like him a lot. I think he breaks him. I think he slow cooks him. I don't think it's a first round. Like I said, midpoint, after the midpoint of the second round, I think Silva starts to put it on him, and a Baghdasaryan can't hang, and they pack his lunch and send him home. So give me Gene Silva, late second round TKO in this fight. And now we're at the co-main event of the evening, a rematch back from LFA between Brendan All-In Allen taking on Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Guys, you know how I go on this podcast, and you know who I'm going to pick. The pick is Anthony Fluffy Hernandez via breaking Brendan Allen. I'm obviously going to give you a breakdown. So I do think that if anybody can scramble with Anthony Hernandez, it's probably a guy like Brendan Allen. He's got very good takedowns. He's got good jiu-jitsu. We don't see him use the jiu-jitsu too much. The last time I would say you probably saw him use it was when he dropped and then submitted Bruno Blindado Silva. But looking at this fight, man, I think working the body against Fluffy Hernandez is the way you beat him. The last time we saw him the last time we saw him lose, man, I cannot talk today, was a knee to the body from Kevin Holland. Caught him stepping in, boom, knee him to the body, elbows over the top. Brendan Allen has very good body shots and very good kicks to the body. We saw that against Punahele Soriano when Soriano got his first loss in the UFC. That rear kick to the body, just bang, 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 over and over and over again. I would not be surprised if Fluffy was starting to pressure, starting to break him down, and he just banged a big rear kick to the body and hurt him. Wouldn't surprise me at all. I think that's how you have to beat a guy like Fluffy Hernandez. And I think the first round is going to be competitive. I'll even go out on a limb and say I think Brendan Allen probably wins the first round. But we did see in the Michel Pereira fight, which should have been stopped much sooner than it was. Don't even get me started on that one. I needed that fight to not start round 4 in a parlay for I think like $275, and they just let Michel Pereira get murdered, hung out on a clothes rack, ringed out, put back in the ring, and just continue to get beat on. He was done after the second round. I mean, realistically, he was done. Did he continue to fight? Did he continue to move? Yes, but he was done. They could have stopped that fight way earlier, but that's besides the point. I don't pick against Fluffy Hernandez, and I ain't starting now. Like I said, I think the first round's going to be competitive. If this is a 5-round fight, Fluffy murders Allen past the midpoint of the second round. Now, it being a 3rd-round fight or a 3-round fight, you have to think, does Fluffy get the finish or does Fluffy win a decision? I think Allen will tire out in a 3-round fight regardless if it's 3 rounds or 5 rounds. I think the cardio has always been kind of an issue. I think Allen does very good when he's in the driver's seat, and when he gets pushed back, when he gets pressured, when it starts to go him fighting on the back foot, that's where you see Allen start to unwind. That's where you see the wheels start to come off the car. That's where you see the wheels start to come off the train and it falls off the tracks, so to speak. And I don't see anything different, and if anything, I think it's going to happen a lot faster with a guy like Fluffy Hernandez, who you can land shots on him. You can rip him to the body. I think that's the best weapon for Allen, would be hurting him to the body and then jumping on him for a ground and pound TKO, or hurting him to the body and then jumping on his back and potentially locking up a rear naked choke. I think there is a world where Allen could submit a guy like Fluffy Hernandez, probably with a rear naked choke, if anything. But at the end of the day, I just think the forward pressure, the combinations of Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, I think better overall striker is Brendan Allen, but I think people underrate Fluffy Hernandez's striking game because he's so heavy on the grappling. And the one thing I like about this guy is he is a free-flowing grappler. Now, what do I mean by free-flowing? He will give up positions just to make sure he's still in the dominant position. Now, I feel like he did it a little bit too much against Michel Pereira. I mean, he probably could have had like 3 or 4 of those far side guillotine chokes, and he gave them up just to continue to pound on him. When you think he can pound on him to get him out of there, he just goes back to the choke. I mean, Fluffy could have gotten like 20 finishes in that fight. But I do think the first round's probably competitive. I think Allen's 1-2 is very solid. That could be a problem for Fluffy, but I think Fluffy's just going to eat it. I think Fluffy will eat the big shots of Allen in the first round. Allen will start to get pushed back towards the end of that second round, maybe like the last 75, 80 seconds of the round. You'll see Allen really start to be on that back foot. Fluffy's going to start to land his 1-2. He's going to start to throw some combos. I think he probably gets a takedown at the end of the first round just to stake his claim, like, all right, we're in this fight now, baby, let's go. And then I think in the second round, you're going to see Allen huffing and puffing after like a minute and a half. I think those takedowns, the forward pressure, it's just going to break Allen. I could see a submission, but I'm going to go with a ground and pound TKO in the like last 2 minutes of the second round. I know that's really specific, but I think he finishes him in the second round by ground and pound TKO. I could see a sub. You know, Allen, I don't think has been submitted, at least in the UFC. He has not. I believe the last time he got submitted was by Trevin Giles back in 2016. Now, I think Fluffy's the type of guy where he wants to make a statement. Maybe he does go for a submission against Brendan Allen. I think Allen is going to be so exhausted by the time we're 2 minutes into the second round that he's just going to break him and fold him. Now, he could finish him in the third. Maybe Allen comes back, lands some good shots, and makes it to the third round. But I think even if Allen makes it to the third round, I think he gets finished. If this was a 5-round fight, this is an easy 2-3-4 finish for Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. And I think he's going to finish Brendan Allen. He won their first fight via unanimous decision. A lot of grappling, a lot of forward pressure, a lot of striking. And I still think, yes, Brendan Allen is a much better fighter than they were back then. But I also think Fluffy Hernandez is a much better fighter than he was back then. I think the momentum of Fluffy Hernandez that he has not only in his career, but in a fight, when he starts to sense that you're getting tired, he will up that gas. He will up that pressure. And he's not going to blow his wad. He's not going to gas himself out. He's going to flow from position to position, go from position to submission, back to position and land ground and pound until he just finishes you, you know? And like I said, that Michel Pereira fight should have been finished way before it ended. I think that was far and away should have been stopped probably like a round and a half earlier. I'm going to be honest with you. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go Anthony Fluffy Hernandez by TKO. I think he's going to hurt him. I think he'll go for submissions, but I think Allen will get out. He'll just go back to the ground and pound, and I think he ground and pounds him out. Now, Fluffy Hernandez is the type of guy where he probably could get a submission against Brendan Allen. If Trevin Giles is subbing you, Fluffy Hernandez can sub you. So if the line on the submission for Hernandez is like ridiculous, play the submission. But I'm going to go with a late second round ground and pound TKO for Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. It could be in the third round. If you're going to play KO, just play KO 2-3 for Fluffy. And yeah, I think the Fluffy train keeps on rolling, and I think he's going to butcher Brendan Allen. And I actually think Fluffy Hernandez is one of the hardest fights for the champion Dricus du Plessis in that division. I've said it for a little while, and I think that it's probably one of his hardest fights, aside from Hamzat. But I think Hamzat's only a hard fight for about a round and a half. Fluffy's going to continue to be in your face and continue to keep moving forward. I wouldn't be surprised if Anthony Hernandez was the guy who beats Dricus du Plessis. You heard it here first. But, yeah, give me Fluffy breaking Brendan Allen in the late portions of the second round. Second round, ground and pound TKO, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Now we're at the main event of the evening. In the bantamweight division, you have the return of Triple C Henry Cejudo taking on the Kung Fu Kid in Team Alpha Male's Song Yadong, or Yadong Song, however you want to pronounce that. I think that this fight is going to be close. I would say that the fighter who probably has better cardio in the championship rounds would be the man who's been a champion multiple times in this organization in Henry Cejudo. I think that he probably can push the pace a little bit higher in the third, fourth, and fifth than a Song Yadong. I also think that you could make some similarities or comparisons to the Marlon Moraes and Henry Cejudo fight, where the power and explosiveness and the knockout upside is going to be on Song Yadong, but the forward pressure, the, backing the opponent up against the wall, coming forward, landing shots, looking for takedowns, that is going to be on the side of Henry Cejudo. I also think if this fight was 3 years ago, I would pick Henry Cejudo. The fight is not 3 years ago, it is now. And I have to lean ever so slightly towards the favorite in Song Yadong. I think that he is at a different point in his career, or a different level in his career at this point. I know he's going to be at a wrestling disadvantage. I know Peter Yan was able to get a lot of takedowns against him, but I think Henry Cejudo probably gets a couple takedowns, but I see Song Yadong working his way back up to the feet. And I think the speed and power and the boxing precision of a Song Yadong is what's going to cause a lot of trouble for Cejudo when he tries to get in and close the distance. Now you're going to say, like I already mentioned, well, he was able to walk through the fire against Marlon Moraes. He was able to, break him down. And that was like the highest level of Marlon Moraes we ever saw in the UFC. Getting his legs kicked off, getting punched, getting kicked, whatever. And he didn't slow down. I think, number one, Song can keep his pace and game plan up for a longer portion than Marlon Moraes. I also think Song Yadong is much more durable than a Marlon Moraes. And I think that, he's more well-rounded than a guy like Moraes. I mean, I don't know about the well-rounded part. That's kind of up for debate. But, I like Song Yadong. I picked him to win by KO against Ricky Simone. I picked him to lose against Peter Yan. I thought it was going to be a late TKO, but it went the distance. I picked him against Corey Sandhagen, and that fight was a lot closer than people gave Song Yadong credit for. And it was 2-2 going into the fifth when that cut ended up stopping the fight. And Song still had the cardio to push into that fifth round. So I don't necessarily consider that as a loss. I mean, he got hit with an elbow or a knee. I believe it was a knee. Or no, it was an elbow. It was an elbow, like an up elbow, and then cut his eyebrow, and that was it. I think Henry Cejudo is still the real deal. I think he can still push a high pace. I mean, he lost a split decision to the champion in Aljamain Sterling. A lot of people thought he did enough to win that fight. He got a lot of takedowns on Aljamain, which isn't very easy to do. And, I think it's going to be competitive. I think the championship experience does go to a guy like Cejudo, but he's still kind of been out of the game, been in and out. And the one thing I know about Song Yadong is, like, through wins and losses, this guy's never stepped away from... This guy's never stepped away from the game. And honestly, I think Song Yadong probably is just at a better point in his career. Like, take the experience, take all that, and put it aside. I think Song Yadong is the crisper striker. I think he has good footwork, good movement. I think the leg kicks of Henry Cejudo could be a big problem for Song Yadong. But I've also seen Song Yadong sit down and counter leg kicks with bombs of right hands and left hooks. And I could see a similar situation where Cejudo throws a big leg kick, and then Song Yadong just braces for it and sends a right hand that knocks Henry Cejudo's head off his shoulders. You know, we have seen Cejudo get rocked before. That was back at 125. You know, he's got a very good left hook. Cejudo loves to do that little 1-2 slip, come back with the left hook. And he's good at that. But I don't think he can get into a boxing match with Song Yadong. But this isn't a boxing match. This is an MMA fight. And if the wrestling starts to work early and often for Cejudo, I think he can win. But I don't necessarily think that that's going to work, to be honest with you. I think he might get a couple takedowns early, but I think Song Yadong works his way back up. He pummels, goes over under, circles off the cage, gets back to the center. And I think the more damaging shots come from Song Yadong. I think the cardio's on the side of Henry Cejudo. I think this fight is close. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, it's all Song Yadong. But I'm going to side with the younger and hungrier, in my opinion, Song Yadong to get the job done here. I could see a knockout. I think he could knock him out 100%. But I'm going to go with a decision. Give me a 48-47 unanimous decision for Song Yadong over Henry Cejudo. If I was going to bet it, though, I honestly think I would probably take Song Yadong KO round 3, 4, 5. Or 3, 4, 5. I mean, he did knock out Ricky Simón in the 5th round. You know, so he does carry that power. Like, now Cejudo pushes a higher pace. He's a better striker than Simón. But, yeah, I'm going to go with Song Yadong. I think he gets a decision victory and wins 48-47, unanimous decision. Give me the Kung Fu Kid, Song Yadong, to get the job done here over the former champion. All right, that's going to be it for my UFC Seattle preview, predictions, and breakdown. Don't forget to leave me your predictions, your favorite bets, and your favorite analysis in the description, in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and smash the notification bell with the spinning wheel kick right to the nuts so you don't miss any future uploads from the premier mixed martial arts and pro wrestling channel on YouTube. I'm your host, Double M, and let's make some money at UFC Seattle. I'm out.